Hello and welcome to the PhD Life Raft podcast. I'm Emma Brzezinski and today I am talking to the awesome Leanne Sorbel. We're talking about the PhD and parenthood. We talk about mum guilt. We talk about the importance of reflection. And we also talk about the magic of Monday morning coffees. So I do hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, Leanne.
Hello, Emma.
Talking to me at 6:30 in the morning. You are a legend, a legend. Thank you for this so much. I'm really looking forward to chatting to you. I have to confess that we know each other, and we know each other from all sorts of things, really. But mainly now you're in PhD Circle, so I get to meet with you every month. PhD Circle is a gorgeous group, isn't it?
It is. It really is.
Meet every month and support each other, basically, on the PhD journey.
Yeah. What a lovely gang it is to be part of. So
really yes. Gorgeous people, of which you are one. And thank you so much for saying that you'd come and talk about PhD and parenting. That's what we're going to go into, because I think that, as I was just saying before we came on, this is such an important area, and so many people are doing that thing. And I think to sort of hear from you and your thoughts on that would be really useful. But before that, I always ask people to tell us a little bit about their story. Tell us about you.
Well, thanks, Emma, and thanks for having me on. So look, I've come at PhD a bit later in life, and have done a bit of working and a bit of studying here and there through my career. So I did an undergraduate in visual communications straight out of high school, and then went and worked for a period of time, and then some years later decided to do a Master of Management, and then that was fantastic, being able to study as a mature student. And then at that time I did a research project, which is where I had the idea sort of put to me about doing a PhD, that after doing my master's I really wanted to get into practice. So I sort of said, I'll think about it. And 10 years later, I found myself working in a research centre. So it was practice-based research at a university. And the opportunity came up to do a PhD, and really it kind of was the next step for me. So that's how I came to be doing what I'm doing, and I'm a year and a half in now. So yeah, second year.
How is that? How's the second year going for you?
Oh, it's good. I'm finally into collecting data and got into the flow of things, which is great. And I feel like, it's. I think this stage of the PhD, it's like, oh, hang on, I'm opening up a new stage into it. But definitely, the first year was difficult just because of all of the COVID lockdowns and things like that. So it's actually really nice to be at a stage where I'm able to collect data and be able to meet people again and really get into it. So yeah, it's going well. Thank you.
Brilliant. And it was a big step for you, like you said, coming out of that work environment and all that you had built up and established a high level professional career, and coming into the PhD, there's all sorts of challenges and renegotiations as part of that.
There really is. It's a strange thing. I was working I'm at the University of Technology, Sydney, and I had been working in a professional capacity there, and then suddenly to sort of take on full-time student status whilst also having professional status, working status, was quite interesting, and still is actually. But I think coming at it with a bit of a working background, and that experience has really helped to navigate some of the difficulty that comes with PhD and making your own plans and running your own time, or coordinating your own time. But
Yes,
yeah, it is. It is a bit of it's a really nice way of putting it. It is a bit of a renegotiation, I suppose, or
trying to
work through things.
To see you bringing all that experience that you had, the way in which you can manage projects and you can set targets and all of that you can bring that into your PhD. So this is a whole nother interview I need to do with you about that. And actually there were a few things we were thinking, what should we talk about? And we could have talked a lot about that because you have a lot of experience and wisdom in that area. But something that is really pressing is this you have little people in your life.
Yes.
So that is a whole nother dimension to the PhD journey. So tell us a little bit about that.
Oh gosh, yeah. So what I didn't scatter in amongst my how I got to my PhD was the fact that look, when I did my master's, I didn't have kids, and so that was fantastic. And to be able to spend that time studying and choose how I spend my time with that freedom, I think is was such a delight. And I think sort of before I had my first, so I've got a 5-year-old and I've got a 2-year-old, and I had my first before I was sort of in professional consulting, and then I really still wanted to do research, and so I came back into a research setting at the university whilst also being able to consult, which was great. So it was always about finding that balance between. It's always been about finding that balance between doing the work that I really enjoy and feel like I contribute value towards, and balancing the needs of family life. And then, so I went off after working in that gorgeous team for 3 years. I went and had my second babe, and then after that, that's when this opportunity to undertake a PhD came up. And of course, it wasn't just something I could just say yes to. There was a lot to consider. And, I think it's also important to say when I'm talking about this, of course, it is about having kids, yes, but also I think the same goes for anyone who's in any kind of caring role.
Yes.
This idea of balancing, the needs of others, really, whilst also being able to make time for yourself and to know that you can move forward. Yes. So so it's a challenge, but I went into it with my eyes wide open. I'd been having conversations with some of my colleagues for probably about 10 years about this idea of doing a PhD, and I know every time I talked about it, I'd go through the motions of what would that look like? What does that look like financially? What does that look like in terms of my general, my roles and looking after kids? And I think when I had kids in the room, there was just some real practicalities around what I could and couldn't do, and whether or not it was a smart idea to take on a PhD at this point.
Right.
So it's been manageable, and I think it's also because I've had the right sort of supports in place, and I think that's the key message there. Yeah.
So I think we just need to acknowledge that you are awesome. So let's just acknowledge that, and the way in which you have thought things through and did that kind of thought experiment in terms of like, okay, what's possible and what do I need to put in place? And I know that you've done a lot of that kind of work, and we'll get to that in a minute because I think I'm sure you've got some really good advice to share. But I just also want to note then, so you started your PhD with a very small person and an under 5, and then we were in lockdown too, so you had that as well. So this is kind of, this is intense. This is extreme parenting, right?
It was extreme parenting, and call out to every single person who was at home with small ones. So yes, my first year of PhD was with a 1-year-old, and so there was all of the kind of navigating moving through 1-year-old and 4-year-old, I guess you could say.
Yes.
So navigating through all of those 1-year-old needs, you're still not getting a whole lot of sleep. I was still working. And we're all in this weird, strange sort of gift of a time, but also a bit of a pressure cooker. So that was quite challenging because we were all at home. We're in a small apartment, trying to navigate my husband's work responsibilities with me trying to get started on a PhD and also get some work done. So it was actually impossible. And I think the beauty of that is that everybody understood it was impossible. So we just did what we could. And at that point, what I could do is, in between sort of looking after the kids and caring for them, I was looking at ways I could support my PhD studies, even through the technology side of things. So I wasn't able to have the brain function to to get in and read. I mean, who could possibly read and digest and make notes in that time? It was just impossible. So I did what I could, and I think we got through it, but it was really challenging. And in fact, I talk about that time as being an experience where my brain felt like it was burning. There was just so much that was meant to be done. And
that's a really powerful image of your brain being on fire, which I'm sure a lot of people can relate to, I am sure. And what you said was really interesting, actually, wasn't it? In terms of people understanding, there would be a level of understanding of like, oh yeah, this is a lot, isn't it? This is a lot to handle in that moment. So I wonder then, now, how does it feel now then, when you still have an awful lot on your plate? And I am sure there are still days when your brain feels like burning. How is it now?
Yeah, look, that time also came with settling into, like, I transitioned out of work. So I had about 6 months where I was working still in the same team and a couple of days a week, and then also trying to figure out how I'd move into research. So there was a bit of that. Fortunately, because I'd been working in a research role, there's a lot of knowledge that I brought with me around that. So that transition was okay, but there was still that moment coming in. And but I think as soon as our restrictions started to ease and we were able to go back into the office, that was a really big step for me, because that separation has become really important. So some days it's really lovely. I find being at home a gift, like it's just easy. But the truth is that I take my youngest son with me to daycare at the university. So I have this routine where my eldest has actually started school this year, so we had to change up our routine again. So between my husband and I, we have our checks and balances in place for the week in terms of who takes my eldest to school. But then I always take my youngest with me to work, and then I set up for the day. So that's a really great routine, and just having that space. I have my own desk at work, and I found that I treat it more like going to work, and that it is. It's my job now. And so I go in and I drop my son off, I sit down and I have some strategies to get into the work, and then I do my work for the day, and then I pick him up and then come home. So it's been really nice to have that routine. And strangely enough, though, there's only a few of us there in the office still. I think a lot of people are still working from home. But for me, having that space to think, and we often talk about that, having that expansive space has been really important, and that's been a real change for me. And as we go on, the more and more people are around, so the more conversations I'm actually having, and that helped me think through my PhD. So that's been great too.
I think the environmental thing is really important, and for most people, you're on a spectrum, and for some people it's incredibly important, and that's why lockdown was so particularly difficult. But this sense of having a space where you work, and setting that up and being able to, like, I loved how you said set up for the day and then equally shut down at the end of the day, this sense of, okay, here I go and now I'm finished. So even if that is at home, there's a sense of a kind of establishing and taking it down, but this sense of actually being able to be in a different space. And it's brilliant, isn't it? People now are able to go to the library or go out to a coffee shop, whatever it is. If they feel they need to work in a different space, they've got that.
Yeah. And I'm a bit nomadic like that too. Sometimes I'll find I move around the building. Like, luckily I work in this gorgeous space where I can do that. But sometimes I do find myself in a local cafe too. It's just, I think it's also just where I'm feel I can be most productive for the day. That's what it comes down to.
I love it. So this is so now we're getting into the nitty gritty of it. So number one is this sense of this kind of this have your space and your routines and your space. Anything else that you're kind of from your discoveries on this journey?
Yeah, and I think discoveries is the key word, Emma, because truly I sit and sort of reflect about what's working and what's not working pretty regularly, because sometimes I hit a bit of a wall, and it just depends on where I'm at in terms of the yearly cycle. But more recently, I was reflecting on the fact that a lot of the PhD sort of tips and support is around, things that just I don't know, that they're hard to achieve sometimes when you're a parent, and like one of the ideas is that, one of the ideas that people talk about is getting up in the morning and writing, and for me that's really impossible, and I'm sure many other parents
yep
relate to that. Like, the thing is, I can't be when I'm writing and when I'm getting into my studies, I'm almost not present anymore. And to have a little person wake up and say, "Oh, good morning, Mum," and suddenly like this, like, what? Oh, hang on, I'm trying to get into my work. And so it's just not, there's this thing about being present, right? At the right times and being in the depths of your work, and being able to have that nice thinking space without little people around, and you're also your significant others, let's say. I found that's
well, I was just going to say there was something about, I remember when I was having a massive dose of mum guilt, there was something about the kind of the transitional moments in the day. And I was saying, if you are present, if you manage to be there in the morning when they wake up, well, either transition will do, but that transition of morning when you wake up, evening when you go to bed, it kind of, you can bookend that with your children. Those times are the kind of key times. So I was like, okay, at least I'm present when they're waking up. That's me.
Yes.
So that sense of, as you say, then this becomes a real challenge in terms of kind of going, well, this potentially is the golden writing time.
Yeah, that's right. So I think that's why the kind of the 9 to 5 is really nice too, because I know I can do it within that time. And let's say, weekend work. Another thing one of my colleagues was talking about was the best piece of advice that he got was to always do a bit of work on your PhD every day. Now, when he said that to me, of course, the intentions were good, but of course my eyes sort of hollowed at the thought of that, because I was reflecting on, the weekends, and there's just not the opportunity for me, unless by design, by intention, I'm out of the house and I'm in the office, at which point it's sort of like this beautiful me time. It's a gift on the weekends to be doing work. Can I do that? So, but the flip side of that, of course, that advice is good, and that there is reason for that, because on Mondays, or Tuesdays, because actually I share care with my son with my husband's on Mondays. He has a day with us. So we alternate our Mondays with him. So it might be Monday or Tuesday when I start back up again. I have this sort of strange cognitive dissonance where I go, oh, hang on, hello, study, there we are again. So because weekends are so full and busy, and then you kind of step back into work, you have to have this little moment, I find, for myself, where I get reacquainted with my study and where I'm at. So I think the advice is solid, try and do a little bit of work of your PhD each day, but where you can't, it's about acknowledging that you need that time. I think for me that I've acknowledged for myself that I need that time to say, okay, right, where are we? And get back into it. So for me, I've built in a bit of a strategy where I might sort of meditate back into that. So drop my son off, I'll come and I'll just have a moment where I've gone and got a coffee. I'll have a quick sort of, 5-minute meditation to get into the day. And then a recent bit of advice I got from a friend of mine who started her PhD this year was, no, the one thing I do is I just make sure I read while I have a coffee. And I said, oh, that's just such a great idea. So I started doing that, and that feels really just so natural to do that. So I've been really, it's really helped me to build some momentum, yes, to keep reading and be in material, but also get reacquainted with where I'm at. And of course, planning out my week. So at the start of the week, I do have a lovely planner, which Emma and I have talked about before.
A planner.
And so I really, yes, a planner. I set out what I hope to achieve for the week, and sort of the key 3 things that I want to get done. Sometimes I achieve that. Sometimes I don't. It doesn't matter. It's written down, so it's there for me to come back to. For the bits that I don't quite finish one week, they carry over to the next. But that really helps to give me momentum and to stay really focused for that period of time. But I think the key in that is also being open to the fact that sometimes you have these ambitions and then the wheels fall off. One of the kids gets sick, you're out for a whole week, and just actually go, oh, okay, that's what's happened.
Yes.
And making peace with that, and then picking it up from where you were before. Yeah.
Oh, I love that so much. I love that so much in terms of the space that you're allowing yourself, and to ramp back into the work. Because I think it's coming from a place of abundance, this sense of, yeah, okay, so this is my week. Look at this delicious week ahead of me. What am I going to do with my time? I'm going to take my time to get back into that flow, rather than going, oh my God, right, it's Monday morning, I've got to do this. Because that other energy, where would that take you to? And I just love that you're starting your week in something you can look forward to. I was with you with that delicious coffee. I was there. And this kind of sense of a treat. And look, here I am. I've arrived. It's Monday morning.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I won't lie. I mean, there are times where I do start to get a little bit panicky, and that mum guilt you mentioned before creeps in. The sensation that I have sometimes is, oh my gosh, like I'm not with my kids, or I'm paying daycare fees, and I've got to make sure I make the most out of this time, because my fun son, my school age son, he goes to after school care for 3 days a week. And so, yeah, of course, there is that sometimes that mum guilt of making sure I get the most out of my time. But when my mind goes there, I just start to get into that sort of panicky guilt mode, and it's actually really not productive at all. So I just have to try and channel that, have gratitude for the time that I do have, and just try and get the most out of it. There are some days where I'm just tired, like we've had a sleepless night, or someone's been up having chats with me at midnight, or whatever it is, and I don't have the brain function. That's been the hardest thing, I think, is managing that, your brain, the capacity to be thinking and reading and doing this sort of work. So there are just some days where I have to go, well, I'm just going to have to fumble through. Maybe even some weeks where I just say, well, I'm just going to have to fumble through. I'm having a really tired time, but as long as I keep moving, I'll be okay. And that, at the end of the week, where I can see how I have and reflect on how I have kept moving and have kept progressing, then I realize all is fine. All is not lost. Yeah.
As long as I keep moving, I will be okay.
Keep moving.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I've written that down. And I think,
and that qualifies in small things. It doesn't have to be big. It's just, I read that page. Wow. I'm moving forward. The bar is so, it doesn't need to be high. It's just about getting on with it. And
well,
movement is a big thing.
As we know, if you set the bar too high, it's just paralyzing, and then you don't do anything. So kind of
Yes, what's
keeping
the point?
moving. And what I loved what you said a little bit before about this, that where you are in the cycle of the year, and then there'll be different moments where you'll be moving at different paces, and that you'll be able, have different capacity.
Yes.
And you spoke about that flow state, being really present in your work and having those moments when you are just in the zone and things are happening, and that's amazing.
Yeah.
But that is never going to happen every day for anyone. So acknowledging that, I think, is brilliant, and knowing that keeping moving sometimes is
And it
enough.
doesn't. Sometimes it's enough, and it could even just be, I don't know, putting in. Sometimes for me, that movement is involving just like putting in time to have a chat with my supervisors,
Yes.
or writing a paragraph. Or I'm actually really rubbish at writing, I have to say. I think that's because I find it difficult to do that on a regular basis, because I'm just darting between activities. And I've also should acknowledge that I'm still working for parts of my PhD, so I'm full time.
Yes.
But there is a need to work, so there's also the balancing of that, which I probably should have mentioned from the outset too.
Yes,
because
actually, because we both knew that, we didn't, but that is
yeah,
also on your plate as well. That is also there.
yeah,
And
yes, it's a
and
bit of a juggle, but of course
another
it's
energy.
another reason. Yes, it's another reason to kind of have to get reacquainted to where I'm at with my study. But for the most part with work now, the rule is for me that I have to be doing something that's synergistic to my studies. And fortunately for me, there's work out there, plenty of work out there in my domain that can be synergistic. So I'm grateful for that. But of course, even if it's teaching or doing a bit of consulting project work, it still does take your time away. So I just have to be careful with that. But it's an essential part of my work, my weeks. I have to be working to help with the daycare fees, and help with the costs of living and things like that. But I do find that actually, that again, the silver lining to that is I find that the work that I do actually inspires me in my project, in my PhD project work. So I think it's actually seeing it as part of the whole experience. And I realized that I realized that when I hadn't been working on projects for a while, and I'd had all this luscious time to be working on my PhD, and then I stepped back into work, I thought, actually, it's helping me to be more focused and probably be more productive, to have that work for whatever reason, whether it's to do with the amount of time I have on my PhD project, or whether it's to do with what it makes me think about, what it's made me read, what kind of conversations and it's inspired me to have. So it's in the mix of life, isn't it? How you try and balance it out well. Again, that's why also the bar has to be set in accordance with where you're at. And I think having to work and do PhD is not an uncommon experience. I think for the most part, most people have to do that. So,
and I just want us to resist us saying it's a low bar, because I suppose it's a realistic bar, because
it's a realistic bar. Yes,
you are a human being with a lot to manage, and just
maybe it's.
Yeah, sorry.
Maybe it's not about the bar. Maybe it's actually just about being a bit kind to yourself.
Yeah,
Perhaps that's a better way of saying it. Yes,
really important, really important. And I love this. I love that there's a kind of reflective cycle throughout what you're doing as well. And what I think is so positive about that is this sense of the opportunities that you're looking and going, okay, well, I can tweak it, I can change it. What is working well was that question. What's going well is the question. And I love that. And this sense of, okay, well, things can shift and move.
Yes. I had a recent experience where we have this routine where I would sort of leave around 5 o'clock and go and pick up my son. And sometimes I'd even push it till 6 and then go and pick him up. And then there's this mad rush getting home. And then basically from the hours of 5 to 8 is like no-go zone. It's just chaos.
Yes.
And I looked at that and I went, why are we doing that? Because like that's what we were doing before when my husband and I were working for what am I trying to say? Working, and I just went. I do have that PhD is also giving me a bit of flexibility with my time.
Yes.
So I actually looked at that and I went, oh, hang on, I'm really enjoying this time, this in between time with my sons before work, after work. And so just recently I went, well, how about I try leaving at 4 and seeing how that works for us? So it sort of smooths out our nighttime routine, because of course that could be so stressful. And even now I'm looking at, I sort of got into this habit of the second shift. So coming in and doing the kind of the 6 till 8, and then the kids are in bed. Finally, we've had our dinner, have a cup of tea, and then right, so off we go again. And of course, I don't think I'm looking at that going, yes, it's essential at points. Sometimes I have to do that to get work done, or part of my PhD work done. Sometimes I do that, but also it's probably okay not to do that every night. So, so my husband and I sort of have been getting into that routine, and I'm going, well, maybe we don't need to do that anymore. So again, that's also coming back out of COVID. I think and I'm sure others reflect on this as well. Suddenly we had to work in different ways, and the shifts became essential. But now that's not required. So I'm just looking at that again, going, right, let's see how we can balance things out again.
Love it. I love it as a kind of iterative process.
It is. Yeah.
I'm aware of time. And I can talk to you about this for so much longer. And we've already got some really useful, thank you so much for this generosity of spirit, allowing us a window into how you manage it all. Is there anything else? Because I always ask for a top tip at the end, which is always a ridiculous question, but I think particularly in this situation is ridiculous. But is there anything that you'd like to share or reiterate as we close?
So I have 2 things that I wanted to say. One on the sort of a personal level, and making sure you look after yourself. And this is something that's been super helpful for me, and it's not for everyone, but again, along the theme of like movement, one of those things that I find that I can do in the mornings is go out and get exercise. And so that's been a huge thing for me, both physically and mentally, just to kind of to start the day. So every second day I'll go out and I have this lovely little boot camp, and it's not super intense, but it's just about moving and having some exercise for the day. And my husband and I kind of share our mornings to do that. And so I find that's really helpful to get started in the day. So I prioritize that.
Amazing.
And I found that really helpful. Often we talk about meditation or doing something like that, but for me, movement's really important. And then along that theme, because when I put the kids in care, of course, that's time that I get to look after myself. And I think it's important to also note that when you're looking after others, it's really important to make sure you find time to look after yourself.
Yes.
And so on Fridays, I've also been going for a run. And I found that super productive. Running's not for everyone, I acknowledge that. But I think it was, Emma, you talked about that book, Burnout by the Nagoski twins.
Yes.
For me, I thought that's a really great way to close out the stress cycle and also wind down for the week. And, it's sort of this nice trigger, a nice way to kind of say, okay, I've done my week, and then I'm sort of moving into the weekend and wrapping it up. And so I found that really such a lovely habit to get into, and it's looking after me, yes, my body, but also that's really helpful for my mind, and it's me time. So even if it's just going for a walk or whatever, I think movement's really helpful, and just looking after yourself in whatever way that works for you. So there's kind of that like to share. And then I think it's just we talked about lowering the bar. Yes, it's not lowering the bar. I think it's just about being gentle and kind with yourself, and being adaptable. So when things don't work, often found myself just, I sort of get myself stuck because I'd fight what's come to me. So, you know, if the kids got sick, sometimes I find that really a difficult time because I'm fighting the fact that I don't have the days ahead of me as I had hoped to be able to achieve what or get through what I had hoped. And that just doesn't help. It does nothing to my own way of thinking, and it does nothing for my work. So I think what I've learned from that is just to accept what has been put in front of you at that time. And COVID is still going on, but a really good reminder of that when you're sick or when something comes up and you have to take care of somebody else or some other business, just to accept that and go, okay, right, well, tomorrow's another day and we'll just see how it goes, because fighting it just doesn't help. And I think that's part of the being adaptable, be reflective, look at what's working, what isn't working. If for whatever reason you've got a routine that's just driving you mad, stop and see how you can change it, because there's always scope to change and tweak. And for me, definitely in learning how to PhD and parent, it's been about that. And I think having supervisors that get it, when I talk to them about where I'm at, has been helpful to support that way of changing and pivoting what's going on in terms of PhD work. So yeah, I think it's just about having an open communication with your network, your support crew, and being willing for yourself to make changes, and just keep moving. That's all you need to do.
Just keep moving. This is the motto, people. This is the motto. Leanne, thank you so much for all of that.
You're welcome.
You're an inspiration. And I know it's going to be really helpful for a lot of people. That book you mentioned was Burnout, and I'll put the links in the show notes for that. Thank you. I'm gonna let you go and start your day now.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Emma. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you all for listening.